When I was on the road, I went through a couple of tropical storms that were real bad. I was down in Tampa, Florida, probably 82, 83. And this one tropical storm came up on us. I didn't even know they had forecast for anything like that to happen. But a friend who was also in the street like I was had shown me this abandoned hot dog shop, restaurant, something like Rocket Roy's hot dogs or something. It was built real space agey. It had like a dome. The main building was a dome, and there was a way in, so I guess I was caught in a storm, and I was close enough to that building. I made my way to that building and got inside and tried to bed down for the night, but it was so horrific. The wind was so strong. And I don't know that it was really all that strong. I think it was a tropical storm, not a hurricane. So we're talking about 60, maybe 70 mile an hour winds. But the palm trees that I could see were blowing sideways, you know, like that and still like that. And it started hailing real bad. It's really fierce with hail, big hailstones. And because it was like tin, some kind of metal, the dome, it was perfect for pop, 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 pop. You could hear the hailstones popping off of it real bad. It was scary. I can remember praying earnestly to God, "Oh Lord, please save me, protect me from this storm." And I guess my prayers were answered. I managed to survive that. I was sure the wind at times, it sounded so fierce, I was sure the wind was just going to pick that whole thing up and just, and I'd either go with it or get blown away in some other direction. It didn't. It lasted, and I guess that's a good, wind's getting a little fierce here. I guess that's a good comment on the shape of the dome-shaped building, that it didn't get blown over or anything. Of course, a lot of square buildings were around there, didn't get blown over either. But this wasn't built like out of bricks or stone or something hard, a hard foundation, as much as just, I think, poured concrete and maybe some beams and, like I said, just a thin metal covering. But it managed to survive it. And then another tropical storm that came through Tampa while I was there on the road, and this would have been probably 73, 74. I was staying in this abandoned laundromat. It was one of those long laundromats that was shaped kind of like a trailer, you know, long, and used to have dryers all up along a little plateau. It had a little built-up concrete footing that the dryer sat on. Everything was taken out. It's all stripped out. And the building itself was made out of cinder blocks. Had a back wall, the long back wall, long ceiling, little butt ends on it. And most of the front, it was a little bit of a front on each end, a little bit, but then most of the front was open, where the typical design like that, they'd have chicken wire fencing, and lock a gate to it so that at night, you know, when they close it up, they'd lock a gate and nobody get in. Of course, something that flimsy, they didn't keep anything real valuable in there, expensive. I'm sure they took all the money home with them. And people could have cut the chicken wire and gone in and gotten a dryer or washer or something, but I guess it's visible enough that would have been hard to do without somebody seeing them. So it was just a cheap way to make laundromats down there in the Florida area. I saw several like that. And like I said, this one was abandoned and empty. And so the long part was open, but on each end there was a little bit of a closed off part. They had the fourth wall, or third wall. And I was staying up in the one end where the little closed off part was. It wasn't real visible. And I found a little cot, bedding, like a single bed size frame, and a mattress that fitted, I think, in separate locations. It was almost fortuitous that I found them You don't find stuff like that real often, but I managed to drag it up there to that laundromat. And I know when I first got there, it was all messed up. There's a lot of newspapers and tin cans and maybe even some crap and stuff around, just where bums had come in there and busted up bottles and drank their wine or whatever and busted them up and left a mess. And I cleaned all that out, so it's just concrete floor and center block wall and probably some kind of cheap but relatively sturdy roofing. I don't know what kind of roofing it had on it, but that was fairly solid too. And I had a little bed bunk up in there. I think at another time I had a double mattress set up in there, box springs and the mattress to go with it, double size, queen size or whatever they call it. And that was a nice bed too. And it all fit up in that one little corner, because the corner was probably maybe 15 feet long or something, so there's a little bit of a wall there that you could kind of get behind. And that was fortunate for me too, because when this tropical storm came over and I was just sitting in there normal night, evening, getting ready for bed or whatever. Well, I guess this was daytime. The other one was nighttime. This one was a little more toward the day, but I think it's an afternoon, so I was settled in for the day, probably reading a book. All of a sudden this windstorm came up and trees started blowing sideways again, and I said, oh, this is a bad storm. And it got so bad at one point, the wind and rain was swirling around and trying to get up in there, that even in my little corner I had to get all the way back over toward the wall side of that corner to keep from the rain and wind blowing in to get to me. And I managed, if I stood there, to just barely miss it. It wasn't hardly room to sit down even that was getting wet, and that one little corner part where I was standing was alright, wasn't getting wet. So I don't know, that went on for minutes, maybe an hour. Longer, give or take, less maybe. And it may have been some health involved with that too, but at one point it suddenly kind of stopped, got quieter, and then just stopped altogether. There was no rain at all. You could hear the water falling off of the trees nearby. Everywhere was just saturated, wet, dripping. And I poked my head out. I went out from around the wall and stood out in the little open areas right beyond the mat there. It was like an old parking lot where the parking lot had been. And I looked around, and if I looked that way, the clouds were going like that. I looked over here, the clouds were going like that. I looked over there, and the clouds were going this way. And I looked back that way, and the clouds were going that way. They were literally spinning around the area where we were in the eye at that point. I didn't even know what it was. I don't think to that point I'd really put it together that this was a tropical storm or small hurricane or some, real force storm like that. It really hadn't dawned on me, and it didn't dawn on me why the clouds were moving like that in a circular motion. I guess I was just in shock or something. I couldn't put it together in my head. What's going on? And I looked up, and all along the sides of this big old hole in the clouds, you could just see layers and layers of clouds just going all the way up. And there at the very top was a big old hole of blue sky. You cannot imagine it if you have not seen it. It was just incredible. I had the feeling that if I got down on my knees right there, right then and there, and prayed earnestly with my heart, I'd be swept up into the heavens. I'd be just taken right on up into heaven. That's what the rapture is going to look like. If there's going to be a rapture, it's going to look just like that. And there's going to be people up there in that ring. I don't know. And like I say, if I had prayed earnestly, if I got on my knees and prayed earnestly, I really felt like then, I'd have been just taken right on up into heaven. But I couldn't quite do it, and I think maybe my skepticism or whatever well-meaning but slightly more analytical mind that doesn't want to just accept, the religious tales of our fathers. That sort of thing is true or not, and I'm not making a judgment about it. But at that time I did. I had to. I just couldn't quite bring myself to believe that it was anything but some sort of a natural phenomena. And, of course, everybody knows that's what the eye of a hurricane, eye of a tropical storm, a baby hurricane, is. That's what it looks like, and it's a natural phenomenon. It has nothing to do with any religious ideology. You don't have to be Jewish or Christian or Muslim or anything else to see that, to be there. And no matter how hard you pray or believe it, in some cases, you still might not get taken up into heaven. So we know that this is a phenomenon, and that's what I was seeing. And that lasted probably 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. And then the back end of the wall of clouds started to hit us, and it started raining again. And I got back up in my little corner to stay away from the gusting and circling wind, blown rain. And then eventually it passed on over. All in that same day, and I don't guess it was more than maybe 3 or 4 hours, if that. I think both cases they were tropical storms. And in both cases I prayed, please Lord, see me through this. I meant it too. But they were smaller than what we're going through now, smaller than Irene. Irene's a full-blown hurricane.